All right, welcome everyone to the EV Facebook page shopping guide. I have with me today Jennifer Krill. Hey, Jen.
Hi, Zan. How are you?
Very good. And I will give a more formal introduction in a second, but just to let everyone know, today we're going to be talking about something that I darkly, jokingly call the new range anxiety of EVs, and that's minerals and mining. And a brief background, I met Jen, I have to read this because it's a little complex, but at a protest in Sacramento around 2003, I think it was, while we were trying to get CARB not to kill the electric car, which they kind of proceeded to help to do, despite your giant banners and our press conferences, etc. And so as this topic came up, and boy, is it ever up for the EV followers, and seeking to learn more about it, I almost by accident came across some research that Earthworks has done. And so to give you an idea and define Earthworks, I'm going to reread your mission statement, Jen, to give our listeners an idea, because it feels to me like your nonprofit is perfectly positioned to address this topic. And so that goes, extracting social, again, this is Jen's bio, extracting social and environmental justice from corporate boardrooms. Since 1995, Jennifer Krill joined Earthworks as the executive director in 2010. And there she leads the organization as it works to protect communities and the environment from the negative impacts of mining and fossil fuel extraction. So to the point, indeed, last year, Earthworks issued a report demonstrating, quote, the potential for recycling to offset demand for newly mined metals in the EV battery supply chain. And as I told Jen, I wanted to start off with the basic question, why do we care about minerals and mining in the EV world?
Terrific. Well, thanks so much for having me, Zan. This is a real pleasure. And as you name, I have been fighting for the end of the fossil fuel era for my entire professional career, with a history of confronting the oil and gas industry at every turn, wherever I can. That took me to joining campaigns with electric vehicle drivers to save the last of the first generation of EVs from demolition in the late 90s and early 2000s. And that's where I met Zan and so many people. We co-founded Plug in America to be an organization to explicitly advocate for EVs, and taking that recollection to today, to 2022, where we have an administration in Washington, D.C. that is actively promoting electrification. And not only California, but many states and the European Union and nations around the world are finally on board with this really keystone strategy to break our dependence on fossil fuels. But there's always a hitch, isn't there? Well, we think about internal combustion engine vehicles. We think about their main problem being what goes in from the gas pump and what comes out at the tailpipe. But they've always had another problem embedded in any manufacturing process, and that's the problem of the supply chain. Where did those materials come from? So if you're driving right now an internal combustion engine vehicle, you're driving a vehicle that's made out of steel, that's made out of aluminum, that's made out of a number of other metals and minerals. It's made out of plastics and petrochemicals. And through all of our work on the EV transition, I've been advocating for a lot of improvements in ICE vehicles, better fuel efficiency. I've been advocating for less sprawl, to not have to drive as many vehicle miles. But I don't think we have significantly taken up this question of what are these vehicles made out of? And is there a harm being done embedded in that supply chain? The EV transition offers us an opportunity to re-examine that problem. because now we're talking about vehicles that need different minerals than we have ever needed before. EVs need lithium, cobalt, and nickel at scales that internal combustion engine vehicles do not. And so we have a chance to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that this transition to clean energy is in fact clean, equitable, and just? A key opportunity that we haven't had before, and that really is rare in industrial civilization, where we stand at the precipice of a new supply chain coming online at a scale that's never been done before, and a chance to demand that we do things right before we cause all the harm that we know that mining and manufacturing supply chains can cause.
Amazing. So by the way, I want to state the full correct title of your nonprofit. It is
Earthworks.
Okay, Earthworks, very good. And also I should add that Jennifer is, I believe you're currently president of the board of Plug-in America. Is that right?
No, I'm former president. I'm just on the board now.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And you've been with us since what, 2000?
Goodness, I think it was around 2008 that I joined the board. I was a co-founder, but then I didn't have capacity to be on the board until a few years after the organization was up and running.
Great. And recently Earthworks commissioned a study to research what these minerals are doing environmentally, the impacts, and also, as you say, the justice and equitable angles of that, correct? And what did you find?
Well, we found that if we implement policies, and by we, I mean collectively, nations, states, corporations, municipalities, if we implement policies that maximize recycling, what the European policies are called our circular economy, which I think is a really important and valuable concept that we need to import to the US and use much more in the US, rather than this single linear economy. We extract, we make, we use, and we discard. Like there's nothing healthy for the environment or for rights for the people who depend on the environment in that linear model, whereas a circular model, it helps ensure that we're actually reusing those materials rather than sending them to the scrapyard or the landfill or the incinerator. So if we maximize circularity, if we maximize recycling for these key minerals, we can offset the need for new mining by a significant amount, 25 to upwards of 70% of new minerals needed could be erased if we prioritize circularity. Now that's a big if, and that's why Earthworks is looking to the EV community to help right now. We need the Biden administration, the states, I live in the state of California, as does Zan, so we need the states like the state of California, and we need our municipalities to be maximizing circularity, maximizing recycling, while minimizing toxicity in the process, ensuring strong environmental oversight, ensuring that the rights of the workers and the communities are respected at each step of the way. Without those circularity priorities, without maximizing recycling, it's just going to be that much more mining.
Right.
And in the meantime, in those areas where we know it's going to be hard to avoid new mining, like take, for example, lithium. We have never needed lithium at the scale that the electric vehicle transition is going to be demanding lithium. Where that mining is done, we need it to be done with the strongest environmental and social standards. We've been backing a program called the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, which provides third-party oversight Third-party oversight and independent oversight is so important. Just like fossil fuel extraction, mining extraction it's poorly regulated and not well managed at the government level. In the United States, we govern mining through a law that was passed in 1872. 1872, and it's not that much better around the world. So let's modernize how we think about mining, not by mining more, but by protecting communities and the environment. So that's why we support IRMA.
Yeah. And what can we do, or where do we go to find out how to be involved in supporting these policies that are so critical?
Well, the first thing is, if you have an organization, you can join what we're calling the Declaration on Mining and the Energy Transition. You can sign on to that at our website, earthworks.org. You can also join our listservs and stay and follow us on social media at Earthworks in order to keep up to date with where the current concerns and controversies are. When there will be an opportunity, and there will be an opportunity in the Biden administration in coming months, maybe years, but coming, there will be an opportunity to advocate for best practices for circular economy. And you can support that. There will be opportunities in the state of California, and there will be opportunities in other states as well. The EU is currently bringing about a new battery regulation. So if you're listening to this in Europe, then join these efforts, support the strongest possible recycling policies, insist on strong supply chains. If you drive an EV right now, or if you drive an internal combustion engine car right now, regardless of what kind of vehicle that you're driving, send a letter to the maker of that vehicle saying, I want to know where the minerals come from that produce this vehicle. And I want to make sure that my next vehicle is going to be made out of materials that maximize the recycling and that minimize the harm from extraction.
That's really interesting. Great actions. You know, I'm thinking of two things. One of them is that I had a family member who actually maintained her mental health for years taking lithium. You know, and I bring that up because people are very reactionary. We all are, you know, and lithium, I'm not discounting any of the associated downside, but, you know, we've been doing this a long time. And sometimes when I get really defensive, when folks go after EVs because of things like lithium and cobalt, I say, then go after big pharma, because guess what? They're mining it too, you know. Yep. And it's as if it came out of nowhere, and it hasn't. Yeah. The other thing I'm thinking about is I worked for a while for a wonderful company that did closed loop recycling of plastic bottles. And talk about a controversial, you know, topic, plastic bottles. But the crazy thing about the typical water bottle, it is perfectly recyclable. The problem is human beings. We don't recycle it, you know, but they were turned into new plastic bottles at this company I worked for. So, you know, even the word recycling, Jennifer, brings up a lot of fear and doubt in people's minds. Yeah. Can you address that? Because we're facing that again. Although I just will say, talk about JB Straubel, if you would, because he's my shining star in this area.
I'm not sure if I can talk a lot about JB Straubel, but I can talk a lot about recycling.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people are right to be concerned about recycling, and the company that you worked for, I'm sad to say, is the exception. Most plastic is not recycled, and I don't put the blame for that on consumers. I put the blame for that on the fossil fuel interests. 99% of plastic is made from oil and gas. The current petrochemical build out proposed in the United States, you know, adding more plastics manufacturing in Cancer Alley, which is the last place that needs more pollution, is it is a hedge for the oil and gas industry to be able to maintain their corner on the market. Because when oil prices and gas prices might be erratic, plastic prices are consistent. And most plastic is not recycled, and we're just flooded with plastic, including a lot of plastic that is not recyclable. So the United States for many years was shipping our so-called recycled plastic to other countries like China, where it was being incinerated or landfilled. And then China said, we aren't going to take your plastic anymore. So then we started sending it to countries like Indonesia or Vietnam, or places where unmanaged plastic waste has just become a horrible environmental blight. And the alternatives, when you have that kind of scale of situation, are pretty bleak. Incineration is another source of greenhouse gas pollution, and it gives the impression that we can just keep making as much plastic as we want, and it'll just go somewhere, but it doesn't. We're dumping it in the atmosphere, we're dumping it on land, and we're dumping it in the ocean. So my preferred strategy when it comes to plastic is to keep it in the ground. Let's stop expanding the oil and gas industry. Let's stop expanding oil and gas and petrochemical manufacturing. And let's return to a more sustainable reuse model when it comes to individual products. Yes.
Yeah. I bring up JB Straubel because he has a company which fascinates me, but it's battery recycling. He has
oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And it fascinates me partly because here was this man who co-founded Tesla and probably knows more about electric vehicles, because I think he was also Elon's chief technology officer. So he probably knows more about electric cars even than Elon Musk. And he was not fired. He decided to leave because he knew that to meet the demand for electric cars, we couldn't even build new batteries fast enough. And right. So we had to recycle. So I just derived a lot of hope actually out of seeing that. And there are other companies, doing the same thing. One of them I just ran into the other day that's already public. So yeah, little bit of hope there. And one more time, also the marriage of nonprofits like yours, public policy, and private industry.
Yeah, yeah. For the last couple of years, I served on the California State Lithium Ion Auto Battery Recycling Advisory Group, which was a group that was created out of legislation along with members of the recycling sector, automakers, interagencies within the state, and other nonprofit NGO advocates, in order to make recommendations for what the state of California should be doing as far as regulating auto battery recycling. And I think there's a very special opportunity here to implement and bring about a closed loop system. I do think the public oversight is really important. Just like with lead acid batteries, where we've seen some horrible pollution emerge from the recycling sector, we need to make sure that communities and the environment are protected and that oversight is strong as we bring this new sector into existence. With electric vehicle batteries, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, there are some unique opportunities for second life and extended life as well, which is kind of special and unusual. But in industrial sectors where most things just seem to be predicated on that linear system, whereas with auto batteries, with EV batteries, we have a chance to have a closed loop system that actually has new stops along the way in that circle. And those will help offset the need for new mining as well, because battery storage for stationary purposes is also going to be a need. And if reusing auto batteries for that kind of purpose for stationary storage enables us to extend their lives without the need for new manufacturing or remanufacturing, that's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, forgot about that. And this reminds me too of the early days of Plug in America, writing our FAQ and our myths and facts. I think I remember the statistics like just the small auxiliary battery in vehicles generally were one of the #1 most recycled items in the US. And people, I think it's also a good reminder that why will these be recycled? Because these are very valuable materials. Like, right, as you say, first of all, they have a second life, yay. And then after that, they are still valuable. And when people pay money for something, you have a market.
Yeah, yeah.
So good. Any last thoughts? Again, I'm going to be more of a diligent follower of earthworks.org. Any other ways? And certainly Plug in America, because I know you guys will keep us all informed on what steps to take. Any last ideas on that?
Well, gratitude to your listeners for caring about the impacts and implications of transportation decisions. You know, the piece that we haven't talked about that's very important for thinking about transportation in a climate constrained future is the opportunities that people have to not drive at all. And so even as we are working to replace dirty polluting fossil fuel vehicles with electric vehicles that are clean when we're driving them, and even as we're diligently working to have vehicles that are sourced as responsibly as possible, we also need to reinvest and reinvigorate a kind of a global awareness of the value of mass transit and bike transit. If you're investment company, government or a bank, or a multilateral agency like globally like the World Bank, we would much rather see your funds being directed to mass transit systems than to new mines. Because if we have better alternatives for transit that help people have high quality of life without needing to open all of these new mines for any transportation needs, then we can help protect those communities that are struggling to have safe drinking water and a clean environment because they're on the front lines of large scale mining.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. The dream would be that Plug in America one day no longer needs to exist, because A, for those who still have to drive, vehicles will be electric, and B, we're just not driving as much. And yeah, so that's awesome. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Zan. Much appreciated.
You bet.
Take care.
You too.